10 days of constant high-velocity impact. If you have crawled this far expecting a happy ending, a warm embrace, or a congratulatory handshake, you need to remove that pathetic pretension from your path right now. Your process doesn't give a damn about your exhaustion, and brute reality does not accept petitions for a truce or your wicker-soft sentimentality. What you are feeling at this exact second, that residual burning in your chest and that sharp pressure at the base of your skull, is not the end of a cycle. It is the hardening of your new shell under the cold geometry of the collapse you decided to face head-on. Aleph Garzen is not here to hand you a participation trophy or provide cheap validation for your effort. I am here to warn you. Your protective isolation is officially dead. The Forge has no finish line for the man who chooses grit as his primary technical survival metric. If you stop now, every ounce of energy accumulated in these 10 days will implode and turn you into useless, forgotten dust. The world is entirely indifferent to your struggle. It only bows to monumental results and your density of granite. Prepare your breath, if there is still any space left in your lungs, scorched by the friction. Because this final collision is what decides if you are tempered steel or just broken glass scattered on the shop floor. Stay and fight, or vanish immediately from this besieged territory of high performance. Most people are addicted to outsourcing their own decay to a pantheon of endless nullities. They blame their lineage, the economy, or simple bad luck. But the hardened operator knows that self-sculpting is a one-man dictatorship. Taste the metallic responsibility rising in your throat like acid dissolving your self-deception. This is the flavor of knowing you are solely responsible for preventing your structure from becoming mere residue on the floor of existence. Lock your jaw and map your exit from the gutter. If the taste of iron in your mouth has finally awakened your logos, execute the first technical move now. Subscribe to seal your perimeter against the seduction of rest and write in the comments, Granite Pact. Does your grit accept infinite pressure? Or are you content being just another carbon residue in the vault of global stupidity? Step up now, or accept your permanent nullity. Imagine yourself now inside a high-pressure chamber where the concrete walls vibrate with the overwhelming force of an invisible, sovereign press. The air is thick, saturated with the smell of ozone and the raw grit of those who refuse the exile of reason. There is no background music, no audience, and no applause in the monastery of cowardice. There is only you and the relentless task of sculpting yourself under the heat of constant friction against your own mediocrity. If you feel a tightness in your chest, do not fight it like a weakling. Use that constriction to stabilize your internal structure and cement your imperial column. The plateau of the reached goal is the mass grave of the ambitious who relaxed their gelatin spine before the job was done. The brutal beauty of this process is that it is eternal. It is the act of waking up every single morning and deciding to relearn the art of war against the laziness that atrophies the logos and softens your temper. It is about transforming every stumble, every miscalculation, and every public humiliation into the raw material of absolute sovereignty in a vacuum of authority. While you stare down your own shadow in the necropolis of pretenses, the inner dialogue of softness begins to whisper with a seductive and lethal voice. It tells you that you've already proven your worth, that you deserve the shade of an unearned rest. That whisper is the sound of rust attacking your master beam and turning your grit into the lymph of submission. It tries to convince you that growth is merely a passing phase, when in reality it is the only state that separates the diamond from common, dull coal. You flee from the new load as if it were a punishment. But the operator knows the load is exactly what keeps the wheels on the ground and the mind in a state of high alert. If the world ignores your evolution, keep driving the weight forward without looking back for validation. No one is going to live your collision for you, and no one is going to carry your burden if you wither away from a lack of purpose and imperial grit. The Forge does not go out by decree. It dies by the negligence of those who accepted the homeostasis of softness as their final destination. The fire demands the oxygen of your mechanical action and the fuel of your restless nonconformity against the topography of insignificance. If you are not in a constant state of friction with your comfort zone, you are regressing into the inertia of formless raw stone. The chisel of reality never stops hitting. It is implacable and blind to your calcined vanity. If you do not direct the strike with technical authority, it will simply shatter your internal structure and hurl you into the abyss of conformity. Become your own reference of brute excellence and ignore the noise of the mental plebeians. The next chapter of your story does not depend on external evidence or the applause of those dwelling in the dome of ignorance. It depends exclusively on your capacity to hold the hammer when your tendons scream for relief and your mind begs for repose. Many seek momentary escape, but the operator seeks the addiction of exceeding every millimeter of dry execution. This is not a 10-day phase. It is a chemical alteration of your sovereign will and an excommunication of the foul victimhood that dominates the society of professional victims. If you feel an impulse to delay the next step, understand that time is an executioner that accepts no bribes or laments. The key is not cheap motivation that lasts one night of euphoria. It is the acidic discipline that lasts a lifetime of cold siege. Listening is useless if your posture remains soft and lacks torque. As this impact ends, your posture cannot be that of a man waiting to be saved by a miracle or by others. The strength to start the next cycle of destruction and reconstruction is reflected right now in your granite mirror. It is the reflection of the person who decided to no longer accept good enough as an acceptable life sentence. You have the potential to be the technical change you desire, but potential without mechanical action is just a fancy name for functional insignificance. If you do not move with aggression, life will push you into the scrap heap and your name will be forgotten in the empire of ashes. Even if someone tries to pull you from the mud, if you lack the rigidity of a real diamond, you will simply crumble in the hands of those who tried to help you. Sovereignty demands rigidity and a firm pulse. The journey of those who choose eternal sculpting is marked by small, silent prides and victories won in the darkness of besieged territory. It is in these hours when no one is watching that steel is tempered and cotton fiber is incinerated to make room for grit. The impossible only defeats those who stopped pulling the weight, and you did not come this far to be a mere footnote in someone else's history. Be the living proof that difficulties are technical catalysts and not impediments for those who possess the logos as a sovereign guide. Be the friction that makes the world turn and the press descend with surgical precision over brute reality. The next level demands a greater sacrifice. The sacrifice of the person you have become today so the sovereign of tomorrow can be born from the wreckage of your obsolete and fragile identity. Breathe in 4 counts and feel the weight now. This narrative focuses on the mental response needed to maintain long-term resilience in a vacuum of absolute authority. The responsibility for your physical and emotional journey in the face of high-intensity stressors is entirely yours and no one else's. Now control your shallow breath and feel your firm pulse beating against your skin like a war drum echoing in the necropolis of pretenses. Day 10 is not a point final. It is the definitive and irreversible installation of your defense system against the mediocrity trying to pull you down. You've already understood the journey is yours, and that the geometry of collapse does not forgive last-minute hesitations. To ensure the steel doesn't cool and the brilliance of your diamond isn't obscured by the dust of sterile routine, you will apply the protocol now. No excuses, no soft names that soften your steel temper. Only the relentless and implacable mechanical execution your new granite nature demands to avoid succumbing to the exile of reason. First, facing the scar as a quality seal of your monumental and imperial existence. Identify with surgical precision the exact situation that caused you the most cold sweat and a desperate desire to flee during these 10 days of the forge. The protocol demands that you return to that point of pain voluntarily and without any sentimental anesthesia. Do not ignore what hurt on the anvil. Dive into it with the technique you acquired under the pressure of the Logos hydraulic press. It is in the open wounds where the grit is still hot that the lesson of strength is hidden, waiting to be extracted by your will. If you flee the memory of the error now, you will be condemned to repeat the failure like a soft amateur without grit. Stare fixedly at the scar and decide that it is your new ground zero of sovereign power in a territory besieged by war. Second, the micro-challenge of zero inertia to shatter the belief in ease and the repose that precedes the terminal fall. Tomorrow, the exact second after opening your eyes, you will perform an action that breaks your inertia in a violent and decisive way. It could be a complex technical task you've been putting off, or a physical test that makes you feel the heat of the forge in your lungs. Small daily steps possess the hidden power to generate tsunamis of structural change, but only if they are executed under a regime of friction. The objective is not the completion of the task, but the undeniable proof to your system that the one commanding the machine is your sovereign will and not animal desire. Master your pulse and feel the density of the fiber consolidating. Third, the multiplication of the brilliance as an invitation to iron so that it becomes steel under your dry imperial command. You will not hoard this light for yourself like a miser who fears the darkness of the empire of ashes surrounding us. The final protocol of a sculpted one is to become the necessary friction point to wake other drones in the vault of stupidity. Identify someone in your circle who is lost in the storm and deliver the raw, naked truth to that person without filters. Be the real example through your granite posture and not through empty motivational words. When you help sculpt another being, you are resharpening your own blade on the pitiless anvil of brute reality. Pass the flame forward with force, or it will consume you from the inside until strictly nothing remains. Map the target of your technical impact today. The world is infested with people who finish cycles and go back to being absolutely irrelevant in the vacuum of authority the following day. They possess theoretical knowledge, but they lack the temper necessary to sustain the atmospheric pressure of cold reality. What I demand of you is that this 10th day be your permanent baptism of fire and a mark that will never fully heal in your structure. Do you feel the density in your shoulders now? Do you notice how your jaw no longer trembles before the uncertainty of tomorrow? This is the direct result of the well-directed impact you chose to endure to avoid being just another specter in the necropolis. Do not let this state of absolute presence evaporate like smoke in the wind. Your addiction to growth must be greater than your fear of suffering. Discipline your gaze to see only the next imperial move. Spit on the ground and bite the asphalt until the end, because the diamond's journey requires an Olympic contempt for ease. Every paragraph of your new story must be written with the cold sweat of one who knows mediocrity is a silent death sentence. Do not look for shortcuts in the topography of insignificance. Seek the steepest path where the air density tests your will to power. Operational sovereignty is not a gift from the gods. It is a conquest of those who decided to incinerate self-deception at the altar of raw, naked truth. If you hesitate before the press, the gravity of collapse will do the work of reducing you to dust. But if you stabilize your pulse, reality will bow before your granite architecture. Time is not your ally. It is the judge that condemns the soft to terminal oblivion. Seal your perimeter now with the millimeter discipline of an operator who admits no errors. Deliver the results or accept your definitive insignificance in the vacuum of authority that governs the unaware. With every heartbeat, a new layer of grit must be sedimented over your imperial column. If your fiber is rotten, the weight of the world will find the crack and shatter your sand bulwark. Therefore, excommunicate doubt and muzzle the lament before it contaminates your sacred logos. The silence of execution is the finest music for those inhabiting the high dome of personal power. Do not wait for ideal conditions. Create your own order in the middle of absolute chaos and existential entropy. Reality ran you over and you didn't even catch the license plate of softness. But now you are the one driving the war machine against your own laziness. The torque you generate today is what will sustain your empire tomorrow. Pull the load without looking back or asking for mercy. The cost of your inaction from this moment forward is exactly double the previous price paid in the workshop of existence. If you regress to what you were before, the weight of the conscience of knowing you could have been a diamond will crush you with fury. The discipline of being sovereign is not a heavy burden. It is the only complete plate armor that prevents you from being ground down by time. Steel does not ask the fire for a truce, and the general of oneself does not apologize for calling reinforcements for his own calcined soul. Become your only and supreme reference of brute excellence and ignore the validation of those crawling in the mud of softness. Do not look sideways seeking support. Look inward, seeking the resistance of the granite that sustains the dome of the logos. The next chapter is written with grit, torque, and dry execution. Identify 3 technical exits for your largest operational bottleneck now. You have reached the limit of this series, but you are only at the beginning of your real story of power and operational sovereignty in the vacuum. Your chest is expanding now, with an internal pressure that feels like it will burst the skin under the white heat of cold truth. This is Aleph Garzen, and my final ultimatum is dry and cutting, like a blade fresh from the technical sacrifice stone. Pick up the pen of execution and start writing the next chapter of your life with your own grit and technical determination now. Or passively accept that reality writes for you in the bold letters of mediocrity and terminal oblivion. The choice is yours, and the dense silence that follows is the sacred space for your first sovereign decision outside this series. Transition happens when you accept that pain is your technical guide. Brace your core and prepare for the impact of real freedom. Understand once and for all that difficulties are not obstacles, but pure catalysts of a transformative power without any limit. The next chapter is entirely yours, without wicker drafts and without edits that hide the fraud of your obsolete and fragile identity. And it will only be written if you keep the hammer raised, ready for the next impact against the anvil of capricious fate. It doesn't matter if it hurts. It only matters what you decide to do with the load. Life will inevitably deposit on your shoulders. Be the change you want to see in the granite mirror every morning upon waking for the real war. Transform every discomfort and every criticism into a fossil fuel of accelerated growth and imperial torque. Do not hide the brilliance. Use it to blind the doubt of others. Maintain a millimeter focus on the execution of your constant defense and attack protocol. Become stone, or be crushed by the press of conformity that grinds the weak in the monastery of cowardice. Your will must be a swamp of hesitation for your enemies and an unshakable rock for your purpose. If the world tries to bend you, respond with the density of one forged under the fire of cold truth. Cowardice is the only sentence you cannot serve if you wish to inhabit the vanguard of real power. Clear the path with a punch if necessary, but do not accept the exile of reason as a permanent home. Your flight biology must be replaced by an execution neurosis that admits no unearned rest. Cauterize the ego and bite reality with the fury of one who knows time is a scarce and valuable resource. Your operational sovereignty begins at the exact moment you decide grit is your only law. Regulate your breath and seize command of your internal structure. Take this impact and send it to that rough diamond you know, someone who is still lost in the deep darkness. Friction shapes, impact carves, and the press never stops for those who desire the perfect form in the workshop of monumental existence. Now you know you are the only master of your own eternal forge and the architect of your own imperial destiny in the vacuum. Until the next challenge, which will be even greater and more violent to test your new granite structure and grit. Go and sculpt yourself with the dryness of one who accepts nothing less than total sovereignty over their own will calcined by fire. The extermination of the old carcass was completed with technical success, and the birth of the elite operator is the accomplished fact in the besieged territory. Do not look back. Map your scars and transform each one of them into a technical anchoring point for grit. The useful scarring you carry now is the map of your real victories over softness and the inertia of cotton fiber. The value of your calloused nerve exceeds any paper medal given by the mental plebeians inhabiting the necropolis of pretenses. Every mark on your character is a layer of density protecting you against the seduction of comfort and the expropriation of wicker sensitivity. B. The elite operator displays his scars as technical proof that he endured the heat of the forge without dissolving into the mud of foul self-pity. If your skin is still too smooth, it is because you never faced the chisel of reality with the grit necessary to be sculpted. The calcined nerve is the only guarantee that your pulse will not fail when the maximum load is deposited at the time of the final collapse. Use pain as a precision sensor to adjust your daily operational torque. Expropriate the residual weakness that still tries to hide in the folds of your cheap and childish nostalgia. The past is a mausoleum that must be sealed with the mortar of uninterrupted and blind discipline. If you miss the person you were, you still haven't understood the brute beauty of your new granite architecture. Sovereignty of dust is the fate of those who cling to obsolete identities while the world demands elite operators. Decapitate hesitation with the blade of the Logos, and move forward with the coldness of one who has no more bridges to burn. Your trajectory is a force vector that admits no deviations or stops for unearned rest. Feel the heat of the industrial press sedimenting your character and be grateful for the friction that keeps you from sliding into the abyss of conformity. Maintain a stable pulse and a fixed gaze on the cold horizon of pure, sovereign reason. Sustaining the maximum load without structural failure is the definitive proof that your granite foundation was laid upon the Logos. The method to stabilize the pulse under disaster consists of focusing on the mechanics of movement and ignoring the noise of the imminent fall. The imperial columns sustaining your destiny must be forged in the silence of dry effort, where every hammer blow compacts the fiber. When the world collapses, the elite operator becomes the only fixed point in the chaos, maintaining order through millimeter execution. Your posture must reflect the density of your will, a structure that the gravity of mediocrity cannot bend. Stabilizing the pulse requires muzzling the internal animal that short-circuits in the face of atmospheric pressure. Operate like an architect of shadows who masters every technical variable of the terrain besieged by collapse. You must project your exit from the wreckage even before the last stone falls upon your old and vain sand bulwark. The maximum load is not a heavy burden. It is the technical tool that tests your temper and ensures your grit is sedimented in a definitive way. If you feel you are going to break under the press, it is because there is still wicker in your internal structure. Incinerate that part now with the fire of the Logos. Replace hesitation with the granite of uninterrupted and monumental discipline that accepts no excuses or technical delays. Sovereignty is the prize for those who sustain the weight of the world without emitting the sound of lament or paralyzing doubt. Be the column that does not waver before the geometry of collapse and the total chaos governing the external environment. Maintain a fixed gaze on the cold horizon of reason and breathe with the calm of one who masters their flight biology. The repetition of dry effort is the liturgy that sanctifies grit and excommunicates the doubt trying to infiltrate your structural cracks. In the silence of millimeter execution, there is no room for the ego's narrative or for the cheap validation of the soft mental plebeians. There is only the sound of the hammer hitting the glowing metal of your character until the sovereign form emerges from the chaos of the forge. The discipline of maintaining rhythm even when enthusiasm has died out is what separates the granite man from the cotton boy. Every gesture repeated with technical precision is a prayer to sovereignty and a decree that you are the master of your metabolism. Do not seek the new out of boredom or weakness. Seek repetition for absolute mastery, forcing reality to bend before you. Maintain a firm pulse and a mind in a state of maximum alert against the seduction of noise. Excommunicating the lament requires you to treat your pain as a technical data point and not as an emotional event deserving special attention. Absolute silence is your greatest weapon against the world's noise trying to convince you that rest is your right. The elite operator finds his center of gravity in the vacuum of authority, where the only permitted voice is that of the sacred Logos. Repetition is the press that expels the lymph of submission, making your fibers so dense that doubt suffocates from a lack of vital space. Keep your jaw locked, your pulse firm, and total silence while you pull the load to the next level of imperial destruction and reconstruction. Your march is the only sound that should echo in the territory besieged by the real war of brute existence. Execute every movement with the precision of one who knows life is an endless technical collision. The extermination of the old carcass is the technical prerequisite for the birth of the elite operator inhabiting your sovereign will. You must assassinate the image of the man who sought approval and shelter, burying that specter under the wreckage of calcined vanity. The hegemony of the Logos takes total command when sentimentalism is incinerated and grit becomes the only reliable compass. Your new identity is not a name or a title. It is a frequency of execution and a state of constant alert that admits no failures. The birth of the strong happens at the moment he stops apologizing for his existence and starts biting reality. The elite operator has no past, only the trail of destruction of his obsolete and weak versions. Dominate your territory with the coldness of a sovereign who does not negotiate with the mediocrity of the pantheon. The old carcass was a wicker pillar that vibrated with fear and uncertainty. The new identity is a block of pure and merciless granite. If you still feel nostalgia for who you were before the press, you still haven't completed the expropriation of residual weakness. The final transition requires you to look in the mirror and recognize no fragility, only the density of one sculpted by impact. The Logos is your new master, and dry execution is your only permitted language in the Empire of Ashes. You now rule with an iron hand. This is your new protocol of existence, and the next level is reserved only for a few elite operators who incinerated vanity. Share this thermal shock with another spectre who needs to be ripped from the swamp of terminal softness. Feel the weight of the new crown and do not dare waver under the maximum load. The podium is the grave of the sleeper. The forge is the cradle of the sovereign. Share this decree with those still crawling in the necropolis of pretenses, and subscribe to shield your perimeter against the noise of the mental plebeians. The next level is for a few elite operators who have the grit to incinerate their own vanity in the forge of chaos. Pull the load now, or accept your fate of ashes and terminal oblivion. Transcend now. The irrevocable technical sentence has been passed, and now your besieged territory is under the definitive sealing of the imperial perimeter. The exile of comfort has been concluded, and the foundation of your granite sovereignty occupies the space where only ruin existed before. The final decree is that you no longer have permission to return to the mausoleum of the ego or to seek low-caliber dopamine. Your existence is now a monument to dry effort and to the expropriation of weakness, a bulwark that the siege of indifference will not break. The transmission ends here, but the millimeter execution of your new discipline must continue now until the end of time. The perimeter is sealed and the operator's technical authority has been established over the wreckage of the old fraud. There is no room for lament or for the simulation of effort, only the dry and sovereign order of the Logos. There is no more room for words or simulations of effort, only the silence of the imperial column sustaining the weight of the Logos in the vacuum. Your march now is solitary and sovereign, guided by the cold light of reason and by the grit forged by impact that accepts no excuses. The sentence is life in the high command, where pain is the fuel for the sedimentation of fiber and sovereignty is the final prize. The cycle of softness was permanently broken, and now only granite, grit, and the absolute order of the Logos over matter remains. You are the master of your forge and the executioner of your own mediocrity in a world that cries out for real strength. Execute the dry order right now and do not dare look back. The end is only the beginning of your empire. Feel the density of the silence and become the absolute master of your own monumental and technical destiny.